everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm Jess and today I'm bringing you my August wrap up. I read 5 books in the month of August and I would like to chat to you about them now. The first book that I finished in August was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. So this story was originally in a companion novel to The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Now I've never read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, so when I first picked this up and I read that at the beginning I thought, oh, am I going to be able to understand this because I haven't read that. However, it catches you up very briefly on what happened in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and although I can't comment as I haven't read it, this stands alone as its own story and I thoroughly enjoyed it just reading this one. So this follows the story of Huck Finn, who is trying to escape from his abusive father. His father's very recently come back into his life after hearing that he is now the owner of a small fortune. That's something that came from the previous book, the Tom Sawyer book, but you find out about that at the beginning. So he comes back into his son's life and takes him back to live with him, but he keeps the boy trapped there and is very abusive to him. So the boy sets out to escape from his father and he manages to do this and heads to Jackson Island, a large island in the middle of the river. When he is hiding out on Jackson Island, he runs into Jim, who is a runaway slave. Now Huck already knows Jim. He was the slave at, I forget her name now, but the lady that took him in when his father was away and was sort of helping to school him and educate him and teach him how to be more civilised. Jim was one of the slaves that lived at that house, so he knows who Jim is. And they both find themselves trying to escape and decide that they're going to help one another. Now, at some point they realise that people are going to head over to the island and find them out, so they set off down the river on their raft and adventures ensue. Now, I really love this novel. I especially love the relationship between Huck and Jim. It was very well captured and you really felt how much they relied on each other, how much they needed each other, but then also how much they really loved one another as family by later on and towards the end of this novel. So Huck, the other thing that I really enjoyed about this was Huck's struggle. So this book was written in 1885, so the language that's used in it is very derogatory towards Jim and other slaves that you encounter throughout this book. And Huck is also a product of that time, so he has been told what he should think about the slaves and how he should treat them and what their character is like. And as he spends more and more time with Jim, he finds himself pulled that he knows that he shouldn't be helping this person run away, as that's a crime, and that his understanding of what Jim is like and what Jim should be like isn't matching up to what his experience is with spending time with Jim. So that was really nice. Okay, so it's now 2 days later. My phone memory filled and it stopped filming after the clip you've just seen, and I carried on talking for about 10 more minutes. So after which time I realised too late and the light had all gone. So we're now 2 days later and I will continue. So I was talking about Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I think the only thing I had left to say was that the only part really that I didn't enjoy in this was the section where Tom Sawyer returns. So later on in the story we meet up again with Tom Sawyer, and Tom and Huck are trying to help Jim escape, but Tom is very clear of what an escape plan should look like and the drama that it should bring, and that part just dragged on a little bit too much for me, and also I felt it was unfair towards Jim, and Jim's reaction at the end after how he'd been treated didn't quite match up. So that was the only bit that I wasn't that keen on. The rest of it I really loved and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. So the next book I finished in August was Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. So this is a middle grade book that has been somewhat likened to Harry Potter, and it is the first in a series, and it follows Morrigan Crow, who is an 11-year-old girl who is a cursed child, and she was destined to die on her 11th birthday. But just before that can happen, a rather eccentric character called Jupiter North whisks her away and takes her to another world called Nevermore. And when she gets there, it's very clear that she's not supposed to be there, and her only way of staying there and being safe is to become a member of the Wondrous Society, which is this kind of secret society that's only a select few are members of, and she has to go through has to pass 4 trials in order to become a member of the Wondrous Society. I was not the biggest fan of this book. It was okay, I enjoyed it, I could see that children would enjoy this, but it didn't really grip and capture me. So my main problems were that all the tension came from Morrigan not knowing what these trials entailed, so she would keep asking Jupiter and he wouldn't tell her, although she didn't seem all that bothered. She was just sort of would comment that she didn't know still and she wasn't sure what she was going to do and she was nervous about it, and that's where all the tension came from, and Jupiter would tell her at the last minute or she'd have to figure it out during the trial. None of the trials were actually that exciting or added anything tension wise, so that disappointed me because I thought that's where we would get some real sort of action. I don't think the comparison with Harry Potter is earned. Like I said, I can see children enjoying this book, but I don't think it crosses over into that world where a children's series can be as engaging and as enjoyable for adults as it can for children. So overall, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars to begin with because I think from a children's point of view it would be more captivating. However, on hindsight, I think it would be more like a 3 stars read for me. So yeah, a little bit disappointed with that one because it had been all over BookTube and lots of people seemed really excited about it. I've seen several people give it 5 stars that my reading tastes normally align with, but so that was a bit disappointing. The third book that I finished in the month of August was Lullaby by Leila Slimani, and this is translated from the French by Sam Taylor. Now this, I believe, is a debut novel, and it is a thriller where we find out the ending right at the beginning of the story. So in the opening chapter, and even on the blurb, on the front cover, it has the opening line, "The baby's dead, it took only a few seconds." So straight away you know what the crime is, you know what the outcome's going to be, and it's very much a psychological thriller with the focus on studying the character of the nanny. So it follows the family, a family who have decided to get a nanny when the mother Miriam wants to go back to work. So they seek a nanny and they end up with Louise, who seems to be this perfect nanny, and she goes above and beyond and becomes almost somewhat of a housekeeper as well, and everything seems to be going perfectly. And then as we progress through the novel, we start to see that perhaps Louise isn't quite as perfect as she seems. There begins to be some cracks between her and the family, where I think the husband's called Paul, and Miriam just become a little bit unsettled by some of the things that she does. And we also then throughout the story get snippets from her past to try and show us how she's become the person that she is today. And this explores themes of class, themes of an unequal relationship, themes of poverty, mental illness, and it was a fascinating read, and I think the character study was done really well, and we really got to know the character Louise. So overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The fourth book that I finished in the month of August was The Three Theban Plays by Sophocles. So I read all 3 plays and the introduction and notes that come with them. This is the first kind of delve into ancient classics that I've tried, and I've been inspired by mostly Jean's Bookish Thoughts and also more recently Steve from Steve Donoghue. So I picked up a few different classics at I think I got these from the Oxfam bookshop at the Hay Festival when I was there earlier this year, and so this was the first one that I've picked up, and I read them in the order that they are in this bind up, so they are in the order that they were written. It's the three plays in this bind up are Antigone, Oedipus the King, and Oedipus at Colonus. I don't know if I'm saying that one right. So my favourite of these plays was Oedipus the King, although Antigone is the more famous one. I did enjoy that one, but Oedipus the King was definitely my favourite. And that is the story of Oedipus, and at the beginning he is trying to figure out why there's a plague on their city, and he is told that it's because the previous king's murderer has never been found and never been caught, and they don't know who it is. So he makes it his mission to find out who that is and bring them to justice to try and free his city from this plague. But through doing so, he realises that it was actually he himself who killed the king, and this is very much a play that focuses around the theme of the tragedy of fate and whether you can ever truly escape your destiny. So that one I really enjoyed, and overall I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I find this really hard to rate because I definitely need to reread this and I think I'll get more out of it as I reread it now. I know the overarching plot and storyline. I do want to come back to this, but for my first go I did really enjoy this. It was really interesting to dip into these ancient texts and see the impact they've had on literary works later. So I got lots of Shakespeare vibes from this, and you can see where these ancient Greek plays were inspiration for some of his later plays, especially the cases of misidentity and where sort of action happens off the stage and the characters report what has taken place. So I did really enjoy that one. And the fifth and final book that I finished in the month of July was A Whole Life by Robert C. Thaler, and this was translated from the German by Charlotte Collins. So this is a novella that attempts to tell the story of a whole life. So we follow Andreas Egger, and it's kind of split up into little fragments of sort of important stages throughout his life. So we start off in his childhood, and he has been left with, I can't remember if it's family or just a farmer, but he's orphaned and he's left with this farmer who's very abusive towards him, and although he has children of his own, he doesn't get treated in that way. And so eventually when he grows up, he manages to escape that and sets off and becomes independent, builds his own home and starts to build a career. And we also follow him through meeting his first love, and we are with him when he encounters certain times of tragedy in his life, and it's just following all these key events. And it's a very quiet novel. The language is quite simple, and yet there's some still beautiful passages and some really quotable lines. One in particular I like is, "When you open your mouth, you close your ears." I think that's a fantastic line. And overall I did really enjoy this one. Ultimately it is a character study, so it's very focused on Andreas all the way through, and it's really a story of hope. So in spite of the hardship that he faces and some of the tragedies that befall him, he still strives to make what he can of his life, and he moves on to the next thing. So an enjoyable read, and I think I gave this one 4 stars as well. So I had lots of enjoyable reads that were more than just a good book, but no 5-star reads for me this month. But overall I had a pretty good reading month in August, so I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that you are perhaps inspired to pick 1 or 2 of these books up. And please let me know down in the comments what you've been reading in August and what you really enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video.